So, part two, David Courtney. Very
Yeah.
exciting. That you've had a very exciting life, and you've got a lot more to come, David. But we want to know what happened after you discovered Leo Sayer.
Yeah, life after Leo.
Yeah.
Send in the clown. I call that chorus. That chapter, rather. Send in the clown, which is really what happened, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We were writing all that material. I believe the next thing that happened when we were starting to write what was to become his debut album, Silverbird, that's where all of those songs from that album were created in that apartment in Brighton where we would meet every day. And also within that collection of songs were some of the things that landed up with for Daltrey when we were introduced to Roger. And so some of that material sort of tipped over. And so with Leo, yeah, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I used to get very impressed with him when he was standing next to me at the piano and he'd always be using his hands, a bit like Joe Cocker used to. Do you remember all that sort of, just to be a natural thing for him? Well, because I've been brought up with my father, he loved people like Al Jolson, my father, and I used to see all this sort of stuff, well, I used to hear the records and maybe a little bit of the early films with Jolson with the white gloves and all this sort of thing. And I thought, God, something's telling me here between this whole obsession that I have with circus, because I always loved circus. It was such an exciting thing to me. Between the circus thing and the hand movements, I went out and bought him a pair of white gloves. And he turned up at my apartment, and I said to him, look, I've got a present for you. And I gave him these white gloves. And he said, what's this? I said, look, I've got this in my mind. I've got an idea in mind because of how animated you are when you're standing next to me at the piano. And I can see performance-wise, there's something in this. Well, he thought I'd left the planet. And I said, no, look, bear with me here. And we started looking at the idea. And then Graham Hughes, who's Roger Daltrey's cousin, who created all of those Who album covers. Brilliant photographer and conceptual photographer. Lovely guy, Graham. And we were introduced to him through Roger eventually. And at that point, Graham came down to Brighton to meet me to hear the Leo stuff that we recorded for the first album and started to discuss with me how did I see him and all this sort of thing. By then, of course, you've got to remember that his name hadn't changed at that point. He was still Jerry then. And then we started to talk about the circus idea and the white gloves. And then he listened to the music, the demos of like The Show Must Go On and that sort of thing. And he got it. And he said, funny enough, I've been working with a woman who's connected to the clown fraternity, so to speak, and a particular man, especially this mime artist that he knew. He said, look, this is all sort of mapping together here. And that's how the clown or the Perio image started to evolve, which was, I guess, like Marcel Marceau. It all come from that. And it's one of those things, between the music and the lyrics and then the image and then the name. This is how things all gel together. And now we did say at one point, well, do you create these things or do they have a momentum of their own? I think it's a combination. I think when you open the door and you start this creative process and the channel is open, things then come through. And I do believe that when I sit down and I write, there are those moments when you feel there's something happening and it's coming through and you don't question it, never question it, just go with the flow, as they say. Don't fight it. And if it's right, it'll turn out right. If it's a struggle, there's something's telling you this is not working.
Yeah. When you're talking like this, I'm remembering watching Top of the Pops, and I can remember that was what there was the Ferguson chunky little television with the very, very big 12-inch screen in the corner of the room. And I see this guy with, the clown thing, and I'm hooked because I was obsessed with anything about mime then, but it was very much all to do with that drew me in completely. How wonderful that you told that story.
That's what was so magical about the 70s, you know. It was so open for creativity. I
Yeah.
think even more than now, because you know people like Bowie and Bolan and all that, you know, with all the dressing up and the you know the characters, and the Bowie was the king at it all. He reinvented himself so many times, but brilliantly. And we were living in that period, so you know I was always very into the concept. I still am. You know, Pink Floyd were a big influence to me, as were the Beatles, of course. Sergeant Pepper really kicked the whole thing off, and people like the Moody Blues, we have In Search of the Lost Chord. These were all wonderful albums, and of course, we had the advantage back then, which has now just come back round again, where vinyl allowed you with the album covers, because they were pieces of art in their own right, some of them quite stunning, and together with that and the music, and then they had the lyrics inside. This is the whole thing started to evolve there, and it was a wonderful time to.
I mean, I absolutely, you know, obviously a Beatles fan from when I was a little girl, but they lost me. I think would it have been something when they went off into the druggy world, and they lost this sort of little girl here. I don't know which album it was, but I didn't understand. I think Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, all of that lot, I thought was very weird for my little small brain at the time.
What are we now?
Sergeant Pepper.
60, how many years now? Was it 60 or 70? 70? Hang on, 67.
Yes.
Because they were going somewhere else. And I
Yeah.
was still, she loves you, you know.
Yeah, it went from pop music to more thought-provoking type of, you know, they I guess that's when they came forward with their what they wanted to bring over, and McCartney in particular. I suppose both of them really. They both had ideas beyond pop music, you know, straightforward three-chord pop song.
David, I've just listened to your new song.
Dreams, we touch the open sky, discover who we are. And life is a never-ending light, reflected in a distant star.
It was reminiscent to me of Sergeant Pepper. It had
Oh, really?
elements.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It had a sound that reminded me of that sort of era, but also the lyrics are very thought-provoking. And I know that because I spent a lot of time talking to your daughter Kim a few years ago, and she's lovely and very much like you, very spiritual.
Yeah, she is, Kimmy. Yeah, she is very.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, fabulous. And tell us about how you feel. You know, the whole spiritual dimension is very interesting, especially now. It's much more accepted than it was back then.
Yeah, as I said earlier, you know, I always felt there was that, and I'm not alone in this, that sort of idea that there is somebody or there's a channel helping you. As I say, you know, it always happened with the songs that became the hits at the time. You knew, you get the feeling, you just know there's something happening here. Whereas nine other songs, it's just they're just going through the motion, and you think, oh yeah, that's great, and all that. But then there's those ones, and you think, whoa, this is like taking on a life of its own here. And that's what happened with the likes of Giving It All Away, for example. You know, I sat down to write the melody, because I would always write the melodies the night before or the day before. Leo would come the next day, and we would, as we talked about, would have the lyric. Either it was a lyric that existed more or less, and it would fit, or he would write a new one. But we're Giving It All Away, when I sat down to write that, as the melody was coming, one of those, it's a strange thing, you know, it really is. It's wonderfully strange. As I was finding my way through it, and it's almost like your hands are placed on the keyboard in the right place, and you come back after and you think, how did I do that? What's even more strange is when words come out of your mouth and you don't know where they came from. And Giving It All Away, I had the opening lines. Paid all my dues and picked up my shoes. I got up and walked away. Now, I don't know where that came from. It was not in my mindset. It wasn't like I just experienced something that inspired that. When Leo continued to write the lyric from there on, he was writing it. He was writing it on the basis, as he will tell you, on the frustration of waiting to get to fame, you know, waiting to get there, and the struggle, and he didn't feel at the time the attention was on him because it had sort of shifted towards Roger at one point, and he felt a little bit left out of it. So that his frustration that came out in giving it all away, because we didn't have all this information going on and we didn't have access to it. So the newspaper was that was the point where you got everything, you know. So I was looking through that newspaper and I was looking at the star signs, the astrological star signs, and they were like drawn images of like Sagittarius with the bow and Pisces, and then I saw Leo, and it was this lion with a mane, you know, the lion's mane, and it just came at me, and I thought, phew, that's it, that's him. He's Leo, because I could see it, the lion, the mane, there. It's telling me again. It speaks to you. You know, this is the wonderful thing about it. If you let go, you let be. You know, things will.
I do that with people. You know, I mean, I do that with lots of different things. But I see people. I can see when I meet them the potential in them. It's just like bang. Yeah, I know what's
absolutely.
Yeah,
and on the same level, you know, when it comes to as a producer, a record producer, for me, I often like to go by what Spielberg said, and that was that when he's making a film, he's already made the film in his head. He can already see it, and he's made it there. And it's like that when you're making a record. I knew the concept, you know, with the circus thing and all that whole thing, and then Adam's influences, and he introduced me into orchestration and classical music, because I'd never really been much of I didn't really listen to it very much. He introduced it to me, and like George Martin did with the Beatles, and it opened up a whole new world. And so these influences all played a part of creating something. So when I was sitting down with that Silverberg record with Leo and the clown and the whole thing, it all started to evolve, and I'd already made the album in my head. That I could see it, I could hear it, and that happens to me even now. I can hear it before I've got to the end game, if you see what I mean. So,
oh God, yeah,
and it's funny, you know, because Spielberg's film world and music world, but great parallels there in that respect. Other than sharing the birthday with him, of course, 18th of December. He's 18th, I am, and who's it? The other one, Johnny Depp, I think.
Do you ever feel, you know, you said you get that feeling when you're writing something and you think, well, where's that come from? That those feelings. Did you ever, with any of those situations, feel, oh my goodness, I know something's going to happen with this? Like, did you get those feelings when things were happening at the time?
Yeah, and you know, and it's that thing of the voices, isn't it? The voices in your head or in your heart. And so that tells you, yeah, do that or don't do that, or I've got a bad feeling about it. Yeah, you get it all the time. And of course, the worst crime is when you ignore it and it turns out to be, and you think, oh God, I wish I'd have listened to myself. You don't, do you? You get carried away. Emotion usually is the things that carries you away.
I think the thing is with all of us, I think we have this, we can tune in to these frequencies that we need to at the time. And the problem why people aren't inspired and they're not doing that is because they're just out of kilter with the experience. And some people can just, you know, get it like that. Do you still work with some new artists, young artists?
Recently, I've been the only artist I've worked with remotely recently, ironically, is in the last 2 or 3 years, has been a Russian female singer who's based in St. Petersburg, and she's a lovely lady. Her name's Marina Kapura, and she became very well known in Russia for being the woman that does all the ABBA stuff. You know, she's very ABBA orientated. Anyway, her and her husband, we really hit it off, and so we did an album together remotely because she's in St. Petersburg. I was here. I would send her these songs, and they would be recording them in St. Petersburg. And there was a couple of songs that was like a duet. So they'd send it back to me, and I'd do my bit here and send it back there. and we worked together. And then the album was called Matinee. And what was so strange about it, I suddenly get a call and they say, "You've just won an award." They said, "Yeah, in Russia." I said, "What, really?" There's this award. It's like their big sort of creative award called the Choloskaya St. Petersburg, whatever. And I said, "Really?" And they said, "Yeah, in fact, you're the first and only British composer ever to receive this." I go, "Oh my God." So I said to Manon, my wife, I said, "I'm going to have to go there." And this was pre-COVID. And she said, "Oh, really? It's going to be in winter as well." I thought, "Yeah, that ain't going to be so clever, is it?" You know? But everybody tells me how beautiful St. Petersburg is, and I've never been there. They say it is unbelievable. So I really wanted to see it, but it didn't happen. I couldn't get there. So they sent the award over, and I was presented with it. And but that really shocked me, and because
Where music is concerned, there are no rules, are there, Natalie?
it's the one. It's
No.
global. It hits everybody, you see, and it is a very powerful tool.
I've just finished a play, and that was one of my lines in it.
Oh, really? Oh, there you go. You go. Right on the money.
But
Right
it's
on.
true, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It is true.
Absolutely. And so, and of course, if you're in a position, if you've made it that big and you are in that center point there, then you've got your voice is going to be heard by a lot of people. The beauty of social media now and shows like yours, Wonderbirds, is that you can hit the masses that you never could do all those years before. When I was talking about the newspaper, when we were growing up, that was it. That and about 3 channels on the TV. Look what's happened now. You know, I mean, the nearest thing you would have to communicating with a stranger would have been pen pal. Do you remember being a pen pal?
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
I had a
never did it,
But the thing is, David, I mean, when you think about that, you think about, you know, when we did have 3 channels, we all watched the same stuff. We were all connected.
Yeah.
I know that sounds ridiculous. Like people would say, "Did you see Coronation Street last night?" Oh my God, you know, 28 million people. I mean, you know, and then even EastEnders, you know, at the beginning in the 90s. But what suddenly, it's like it's smashed apart. Suddenly something has smashed. It's like the internet has come in and smashed everything. So now there's so many more areas that are open that were obviously always there before. But it's like now it's much harder to create because there's so much around.
Yes, every man and his dog has got something to say, and they can now do that, and their own YouTube channel and the social media, which is, as I say, is wonderful when you come to promote something and you want to hit a lot of people. Whereas before, you know, unless you had the money to be able to hire like top PR, you know, you struggle to get through the net, don't you? To get to the broadcasters and that, it's very, very difficult.
Before I became a professional actress, I worked at a record company. I worked at Pi Records when I left school.
Well. I know. Who did you work for there?
Terry Brown and Dave McAleer.
Oh, I don't remember that name. What department were they in then?
Well, they were in the A&E department.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So,
and I was only 17, and it was.
Oh,
I mean,
that was
that was about 1973 or something.
off of Cumberland Place.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, I used to go in there. Yeah, I knew it well. Yeah. Funny.
But anyway, so Terry Brown and Dave McAleer might not have been in yours. Terry Brown was sort of like the old-fashioned sort of thing, and Dave was into Northern Soul.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what they were doing at the time. Anyway, I remember that we used to get the list through every day of how many singles were sold.
Unbelievable.
And, you know, you'd see, you know, 3,000, 5,000, 25,000, 100,000, you know, every day you'd see the different figures coming through.
You talk about going to LA and having a run-in with them. I mean, those days, because the money was so big in the music industry, I mean, that's another discussion we've got to have, but tell us that story, because I know it was scary at the time, but it was an incredible story.
What happened? It was my first trip to LA. Terry, he arranged it all. We went there. We were going over there to, I think it was to negotiate the deal for Leo's albums or record deal with Warner Brothers. So that's why we were there. And then we were there off at the back of the Roger Daltrey album, which came out before Leo's album, you see, so it had already started to be a big hit here. And I thought, oh, a wonderful time. We'll go to America now. And then we're in the record company and you got Roger's album and it's going to be playing on the radio and all that in America, which it was when we got there. And then, and I'm staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel. This is my first trip to America. Can you imagine? You're right in the middle of Hollywood there, the Beverly Hills Hotel. You're watching The Good and the Great walking by. And I always remember Sophia Loren walking past and I just sat, wow, stunning woman, very tall. Very stunning woman parading, going across. Wow. So anyway, I'm there in the Polo Lounge every day, as you do, right? So Adam and I were sitting there, and we were having drinks with Ringo. Ringo came in, right? I'd never met him before because of here Beatles, you know, wonderful. So Ringo came in. So what are you doing here then? He said, oh. And there's this whole thing going out on the patio, this patio area of the Polo Lounge. And it's a big wedding going on out there with the violins playing and the whole bit. It was a mafia wedding, basically. And I said to Ringo, why are you here? He said, I'm here for the wedding. Oh, you're friends of the bride? No. What had happened is basically the bride wanted Ringo at her wedding. Ringo was at the wedding. Came. Right. That was the first part of it. The next part was that we then discovered that the Daltrey album, which was now playing on the radio, was starting to do this up the Billboard charts, and the record company purposely pulled it because they feared that if Roger got a hit record, he'd leave the band, he'd leave the Who. So they thought, right, we've got to pull this record back and stop promoting it and get them to withdraw it. Well, when we got word of this, well, we were outraged and straight on the phone to Roger and what the hell's going on, blah, blah, blah. He went Roger, he went completely crazy and straight away to his management, Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp. So Adam and I go, oh, right, okay, yeah, well, we can let him know what we think. We get into this bungalow, there's the guys there, you know, with the glass and the whole bit, this darkened room, sort of like out of The Godfather, and sitting there, and he was talked very gently, very softly, with a little pinky ring and the whole bit, and he said, you boys, you've been making lots of phone calls. You've been causing trouble here. So me, you know, unlike Adam, I wasn't really experienced. I wasn't that worldly like he was. And I started to go, yeah, but you're doing that. And he's kicking me under the table. Adam said, shut up. Don't you realise what is happening here? So I'm pretty outraged, you know. So he turned around at the end of it. He said, look, it's very simple. He said, you're going back to the UK. So, yes. You want to be able to use the ticket, don't you? Basically, shut up, or you know. So
you won't exist.
But it got worse because and he's still kicking me. He said, "Shut up, you know, keep quiet." So anyway, we leave there. He said, "Look, we've got to leave this hotel. We've got to get out of here now." He said, "I don't feel safe here." So we moved hotels, and then we'd go to a restaurant, and somebody dropped a knife or a plate. It'd be like, oh my God, you know. So, and the first thing you do, apparently, when you're in these situations and you're in a restaurant and you're with those type of situations, never ever sit with your back to the
window. Yes.
Oh my God. You have to have part 3 soon.
You'll have to, because that story actually continues on a bit more. But yes.
Oh, well. It's part 3.
This is going to become like an EastEnders series.
I think you're going to become a honorary Wonderbird, darling.
Bye, David.
Right. Bye, David. We'll see you soon.
Bye.